Working men.
Hello, glad to see you here. First of all, can you introduce yourself to the audience? Who you are, where are you from, and with which group you came to Russia today?
My name is Will Griffin. I am a veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. I am an anti-war activist, and that's how I started in getting into organizing. And I came to Russia with an organization that has a long name. It's called the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. We deal with, militarization of outer space, which, NATO is expanding in Eastern Europe on Russia's borders. And we had the incident in Crimea in 2014 that's still ongoing. So we wanted to come for ourselves to learn what is going on in Russia.
So I heard you decided to visit Crimea to see it with your own eyes, yes?
Yes.
And first question, what did you expect to see in Russia after looking through the American media, and is it quite different from your expectations?
So we all came here thinking Russia is this magical place. It's always in the news, especially the past 2 years in the US. The mainstream media news is always talking about Russia, Russia, Russia. But as a socialist, I understand that there has been a lot of history. Russia is the birthplace of socialism. So I came with expectations to learn about the history. But I also know that Russia right now is a capitalist country. So I want to learn personally about what the conditions are for the people, for the Russian people under capitalist Russia. I wanted to learn about the relationship between the Russian oligarchs and Putin and the government. And so in the US, our perspective is very mixed. We have some people who think Putin is a savior. We think some people think that Russia is capitalist. Some people think Russia is kind of socialist. Of course, we have the Russiagate conspiracy, and so many Americans believe in that. But our main goal is to come here for ourselves, talk with everyday Russians, learn their stories, and bring those stories back to the US, because our media is constantly lying to us. But we wanted to go to Crimea because in the peace movement in the US, they don't care about what happened in Crimea. And some peace movements or some peace organizations believe that the US was involved in a coup attempt in Crimea. Some peace organizations don't believe that. So we wanted to come here and highlight and talk with the people and learn about what's going on, and then, of course, bring those stories back and say, hey, listen, we spoke to people in Crimea, we spoke to people in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and we got a better understanding of what's going on.
From today's point, do you see a big difference between Russia and US, between today's Russia and today's US?
Well, I think the US is on top of the imperialist food chain. The US is the current empire of the world, right? We have 800 military bases around the world. We're bombing 7 countries. We're doing counter-terrorist operations in 80 countries around the world. We have troops in 130 countries around the world. We are the current empire. Russia is nowhere near that level. But both countries are capitalist countries, so there's going to be similar problems: inequality, poverty rates, hunger problems. But I do think US is much, much worse than most countries around the world. We have severe racism. We have really high inequality. We are an empire, but we are a dying empire, right? We are going on our decline. And in the decline of all empires, there are the similar patterns. Some of those patterns are the polarization between the population and the government. The French and British empires, during their decline, the people did not know that they had so many colonies around the world. Just like in the US, Americans don't know that we have so many military bases around the world.
It's not that obvious.
What's that?
It's not that obvious to the average people.
No.
They don't know where their troops are, and British people don't know their troops like we were in Yemen, in Oman. They didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
And I think we can move to your biography. When did you join the U.S. military forces, and why do you decided to do that?
Well, first, let me say I was born on a U.S. military base in West Germany, but I was born as a German citizen, and my mother is from Korea. So I'm a Korean, German, American, and I was born on a military base, but in West Germany. In 2004, I joined the U.S. Army. I became a paratrooper. I went to Iraq in 2006, 2007. That is when President Bush announced the surge, which is just more troops, more weapons, more resources. 2009, I was in Afghanistan, and that's when President Obama announced the surge there. So more weapons, more troops, more resources. So I joined in 2004, and I got out of the military in 2010. And that's basically when I began to ask questions about society, about the wars. 2014, I became a full-fledged anti-war peace activist. I joined the peace movement in the U.S. And real quick, just generally, I'd say 2016, I started learning about anarchism. You know Noam Chomsky, this famous anarchist from the U.S., and he's a very big critic of U.S. foreign policy in the wars, so he influenced me a lot. But then after a year or two, anarchism wasn't answering the questions that I wanted, and then I found socialism, communism, and I've been learning a lot about Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism.
So you can call yourself now a communist, yes?
Yes, I do.
So, and do you think Bernie Sanders is either communist, either socialist? Or neither?
He is neither. I mean, he calls himself a democratic socialist, and I think any Marxist would know that that's not a real thing. There's no such thing as a democratic socialist. And what he really is kind of sort of a social democrat. But he is also, he's an imperialist as well. He supports the military in a lot of different ways. He talks about the banks. He talks about large corporations in America that aren't paying taxes. And he has influenced a lot of Americans to become progressive, but he calls himself a democratic socialist, and he wants to follow the models of the Scandinavian countries. But Americans don't know what socialism or communism is, so they say, oh, he's a democratic socialist? I'm a democratic socialist.
That works for me, yes?
Yeah?
That works for them.
It works for them, but there's also real communists in America that are saying, hey, Bernie Sanders is not a communist, and he knows nothing about real socialism.
Or he knows, but he knows it too well.
I don't know. I would disagree. I think he's, I would want him to become president. I think the America would become a better place if he was president. Of course, out of all the candidates that we have, he's probably one of the better ones, but he's still not a real socialist.
The best from the worst ones.
Okay, there's a lot of people running for president in 2020. Camilla Harris is really bad. I think Hillary Clinton may run again.
If she survives.
She's, yeah, horrible. They're all bad. Yeah, I don't know. I don't like presidential elections. I try to focus on the people on the ground and organize them and educate them, because that's where the real power in society is. No U.S. president has ever really made a real change in America. It's always come from the bottom, forcing the people at the top to pass new policies.
So I want to step one step back to the military theme. And why do you think young people join the military forces? Do you think that the economic situation, their economic difficulties, forces them to join military?
Of course. Most people join the military in the U.S. because they are poor. They don't have education. They don't have health care. And the U.S. military provides all of that for them. But it's also, it's a difference between the races in America. People of color, black people, Latinx people, Asian people, they come from poor communities in America. So they're very poor, they don't have access to education or healthcare, and they have a lack of opportunities for jobs. So they get targeted the most for most of the military, for most of the jobs in the military. But then there are, the white men who join infantry, special ops, special forces, force recon, Marines, a very high-level military soldiers, and they join for different reasons. They join mainly because they want to prove that they are a man. They want to prove to their father that they are a man, that they know they can be rough, they can go into these dangerous situations and prove to the world and to their families that they are tough and they can survive.
Like war dogs or
Yeah, exactly.
hawks.
Yeah.
And what does American soldiers think of what their army doing and the whole imperialism situation?
Well, first of all, they don't know what the word imperialism means. Most U.S. troops and soldiers believe that they are, quote, providing a service for their country, and they believe that they are protecting the world. They believe they are fighting terrorists to protect the rest of the world, and especially their own country. And I believed this when I was in the military as well, and that was part of the reason I joined, that it's this ideology called American exceptionalism. It believes that America is the best country in the world, and America should protect the rest of the world from all the dangers anywhere, whether it's terrorism or communism or whatever. They think that the U.S. troops should be around the world and be the police of the world, right? And they really believe that they're sacrificing their lives for a better, something better and higher than them, right? And American people believe that too. But there are a portion of troops, a small segment of society that is starting to say, these wars aren't working. We're not winning the wars, and we're spending so much money, and people are dying, and we have a lot of high veteran suicide rates. So a lot of veterans are, killing themselves. So people are starting to question the wars, but they don't know how society works, and they don't know what to do, and they feel powerless, like they have no power, so they don't know what to do.
And what was the breaking point for you when you decided to change your ways and to quit armed forces and start to fight for the peace?
So when I went to Iraq, I was in the surge. I was in Iraq for 15 months. So 1 year, 3 months. And we went there and nothing got better. And I began to ask questions about myself, about the U.S. military, about the war. And my superiors, my boss, my chain of command, of course I would ask them, and they don't know the answer. They joined like me when they were 17, 18 years old. So I began to ask questions in the war, but I never had those answered. And then I went to college, university after the military, and I studied U.S. foreign policy, and I got a little bit more answers. And then I joined the U.S. peace movement, and then I got a little bit more answers. Then I became an anarchist, I became a little bit more answers. But then I became a Marxist, and I was like, okay, I know what's going on now. Finally.
Yes. And what do you think, which are the main difficulties for the veterans who came from the army and they can't find themselves in peaceful life? What are the main difficulties for them?
This is a personal battle inside of their minds. It's the biggest, difficulty that they have, because the first thing they have to do is admit that they don't know what they participated in. They don't understand the wars. They don't know who they were serving. So I don't use the word serve when I talk about my military experience, because I know that my military experience was serving the bourgeoisie, the ruling class. But the troops believe that they are serving the people, the American people. They believe that they are serving the Iraqi people, the Afghani people, whatever country they're in. They believe that they are serving those people. But they have to, it's very difficult for them to ask themselves and admit to themselves, what am I doing? Do I know what I'm doing? What should I do? And also there's a lot of guilt because, most of the deaths in these wars are innocent civilians, people that have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda or Taliban or ISIS or IS. And that's a very difficult step to take. especially when you come back in American society and civilians, Americans, all of society are saying, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, thank you for your service, constantly putting the veteran on the pedestal and saying you did a good job. But it's you have to step down and say, like, you know what, I was wrong. I was wrong, I apologize. And then you can start asking questions and getting those answers. But also you need someone to guide you, I think, because it's hard to go on the internet and there's so much information, right? So if you have someone to guide you, if you could join an organization, because I think a lot of, even communists, they have mentors who have taught them theory and history and practice, because it's so rich and there's so much to learn.
In your opinion, are left's ideas are growing in US today, and are they growing as fast as the neo-Nazis or alt-rights are growing?
That's a good question. So I think leftist theory is growing among the younger population, because the younger population is in 2008 we had the Great Recession, and if you're a 20-year-old, then half of your life has been through since the Great Recession, and nothing has gotten better. We have not reached pre-2008 levels as far as the economy goes in the US. So, and we have things like climate change, nuclear weapons, global and local inequality. And I think the younger population is saying, you know what, I'm going to learn something besides capitalism, because this system, whatever it is not working. But then there are also a small portion of society which is like the old communists that were fighting in the 60s and 70s against the Vietnam War, and but there was also, the CIA and FBI. They created programs to infiltrate and split apart the socialists and communists in the U.S. specifically, because they knew that the Soviet Union was and communist China was like this shining example for the world. But the Soviet Union collapsed, and that had impacts throughout the world, and especially in America, where an entire generation was like, I don't know what to do. Is this the end of history? Have we lost? But the younger generation is definitely, I think, the source of where we can build a base of power.
I looked through your YouTube channel, your Patreon, and etc. And I wanted to ask you, what includes your activity, anti-military activity, besides the internet activity, like meetings or something?
For my peace work?
Yes, for your peace work.
Wow, I have a long list. I first joined an organization called Veterans for Peace in 2014, and in 2017 I was on the board of directors. But I'm not on the board of directors anymore. I'm on the board of directors of this organization, the Global Network, where we fight militarization of space and try to prevent the arms race from entering space. I also work with another organization called About Face Veterans Against the War, and these are post 9/11 veterans only. So mainly Iraq veterans, Afghanistan veterans, maybe some from Syria, or one of the countries that we're bombing right now. But anytime after 2001, if they are a veteran, they can join this organization. So what have I done? I've been to South Korea 4 times. It's since 2015. I've been to Okinawa and Japan 5 times. I've been to India and Nepal, where I spoke to students, university students, high school students, and we organized a peace conference there. I've been to Palestine in Israel, and I learned about the occupation there. I've been to the UK. I learned about the peace activists and some of the leftists organizing there. And I've been all around the US. One large thing, I wonder if you've heard about it, Standing Rock, the Native Americans fighting the pipeline and the oil and gas industries, which was a very powerful movement that was large in 2016. But now I'm organizing with communists and Marxist-Leninists, Maoists, and even Marxist-Leninists. And I plan to travel to Western Europe to learn about what they're doing there and try to make connections to America, because I think we all know that leftists around the world are very small right now. So we have to rebuild this up and build solidarity between each other.
That's quite impressive, at least. Yes. And the next question is about Assange, Snowden, Chelsea Manning, some people and most of the media will call them the traitors of America. And your political positions are close to that. And don't you fear to be called a traitor and to be pursued by US government? And don't you fear for the being caught to the jail?
Well, first I want to say Assange, Snowden, these very famous whistleblowers are heroes, but they also show the contradiction in the liberal democracies, that they are not democracies, because these people were just telling the truth and the government came after them, and now mainstream America, mainstream Americans, the general public, they see these people as traitors to their country. And of course, like myself, I can relate. I'm not a whistleblower, but I am someone who came from mainstream America and started to speak out against US foreign policy. And of course, the people I went to Iraq and Afghanistan with, they think that, my friends, they think I'm a traitor. They think I went crazy. They make up something to justify that they were right and that I was wrong. But I get it all the time speaking out, where I have active duty, soldiers in the US military. When I'm doing public speaking, they will come up and they will argue against me and say that I'm wrong. But that's why I try to provide information on the internet and be like, here, listen, the US government says 800 military bases. The US government says more innocent civilians have died in these wars, right? And try to create this cognitive dissonance in their mind so they begin to question the wars and what they're doing.
And let's move on to the American foreign policy. What do you think about its modern policy in Latin America and the Middle East, like these days?
So Latin America is, okay, this goes back to what America calls the Monroe Doctrine. There was a president named Monroe, and he announced this doctrine in, 1823, I believe it was, saying that the Western Hemisphere, which is North America and South America, belong to the United States, and that the Europeans can have the rest of the world, right? This is 70, 80 years ago or something like that. So Latin America, South America, has always been in the United States' backyard, so they want to control anything and everything that happens on that continent. And that's just a continuation of what we're seeing here today with Venezuela and the numerous countries all in Latin America. Now, Middle East I think there's several reasons, and it goes by country, and it's very complex. But I think Afghanistan. You want me to go through a couple of these countries and why the U.S. is in?
If you want so.
Well, I think it's good to understand. So the U.S. went into Afghanistan supposedly to stop the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and terrorist organizations who they claim was organizing and training in Afghanistan and conducted the attacks on the World Trade Centers in New York City in 2001. But I think the real reason is to create chaos on the borders of China and in the Middle East and Iran. And Pakistan is always involved in this. But it's also to test weapons on a civilian population for the military-industrial complex. And then you have Iraq, where Iraq had oil, and Saudi Arabia also did not want that Iraq on the world market. So you destroy the country and you keep the oil off of the market. But there's also a lot of influence from Israel, who I would argue controls a lot of U.S. foreign policy. And Israel did not like Saddam Hussein in Iraq and thought that Iraq was a threat to Israel's national security. So they lobbied in the 1990s for the U.S. to go and destroy Iraq. But they've had plans to destabilize the Middle East for a long time now, and the U.S. is all over, at least bombing 7 countries in the world right now, most of them in the Middle East. But the point is, there's a lot of different reasons why the U.S. is in the Middle East. To destabilize the area, to test weapons, to create fear among the American peoples, to increase the military budget, to spend more and more and more on war. and also have confrontations with China and Russia, where you destabilize these regions, and it can create a threat to the borders of these countries as well. Yeah, that's about it.
And from the right side, there could be an argument about that. Some can oppose you, saying that American military activity gives the jobs to Americans, gives money to American economy, and these wars provides many cheap resources all over the world from different countries. And without all of this, America will be quite a poor country. What can you say about this?
The U.S. is one of the largest oil producers in the world. They don't need to go into these countries to get oil. They do it to keep it off of the world market. But also, for the jobs argument, the U.S. does create jobs, but not as much as it can if we started to convert the military-industrial complex into jobs for renewable energies. And there's been several studies done from many universities in the U.S. where they say, okay, if we spend more money in getting people to work on building infrastructure, on working on renewable energies, and sustainable technologies, new rail systems, hydroelectric systems, the whole nine, it will create 3 or 4 times more jobs than the military-industrial complex will. And I think China's One Road Belt initiative is a really good anti-immigration policy, because what the U.S. does is goes and destabilizes all of these countries, and it creates a refugee crisis, right? And I think another way of doing it is go in, help that economy, build those countries up where the people don't want to leave the country. And that's how you fight immigration problems and refugee problems. But the alt-right, you know, they are it's mainly a white supremacist organization, and they're very conservative. So they believe in a strong military power. And of course, like I said earlier, they believe in the very strong ideology of American exceptionalism, that no matter what they do, they will always be on the correct path, as long as America is leading the way.
Let us imagine that your anti-military activity reaches the higher success. Is it possible to stop all these wars that America provides without canceling capitalism in America?
I think that's a contradiction, right? In capitalism, is that it's always seeking out new resources, new markets, new labor, trying to exploit new people. And in order to do that, it's going to have to go to war and fight other people. But we also live in a world where the U.S. is the dominant power, and I feel like they are the world's leading imperialist power, and there are, you know, you could call them sub-imperialist powers. And then you have the global South, you know, Latin America, Africa, South Asia, the poorest countries in the world. And these imperialist countries go in and exploit those people. And so these countries are allies with each other to conduct imperialism overseas to the poorest nations in the world, which includes, like you said earlier, Latin America and the Middle East, some of the poorest areas in the world, but also very resource rich. Because if you look at Europe, it has the least amount of resources in the entire world, but Africa and Latin America has the most resources in the world. But I don't think inherently capitalism is violent. You have to exploit people to make money. And if your ideology is to make more money, then you're going to continue to exploit people, and it doesn't matter how you exploit them. If you're going to exploit them in the workplace, or you're going to kill them and take all of their resources and take control of their entire states. So capitalism is just violent. It doesn't matter which way it is. There is no peaceful capitalism.
So only socialism brings us peace?
Of course, that's the antidote.
If we just try to imagine this fantasy scenario that US stopped being this military hegemony all over the world and stepped back to its borders, would be the American place taken by other imperialistic states?
Isn't that the contradiction of global capitalism? Is that if everyone is competing to be at the top, there's always going to be someone at the top. But I mean, so listen, the 21st century, we're facing existential crises like climate change and nuclear weapons and inequality. And this global structure of global capitalism cannot survive the 21st century. So we're going to have to end global capitalism in this century, or our entire species are going to end. Our entire planet is going to be destroyed. Much of it's going to be underwater. We're going to have problems with food sources. We're going to have more conflicts because the US and even Russia sells the most weapons around the world, and most of it is sold in the global south, the poorest areas. And these are where the refugees are coming from, right? So we got to realize we live in an interdependent world, and that's why capitalism has to go in order for us, humans, to survive this 21st century.
So we have to establish socialism everywhere to stop wars and to stop like imperialism.
Yes, there's only, so socialism, will end the wars, end exploitation, end inequality, and create a prosperous world. It's going to be difficult, and we're going to have to try a lot of new things, but as far as I can tell, that is the only path. And it's not just creating socialism, it's getting rid of the bourgeoisie, it's getting rid of the ruling class. Because we can sit here and think about whatever world we want to live in and dream up all these places, but what is preventing us from getting there, right? It's the ruling class. It's the global ruling class, it's the Russian ruling class, it's the US ruling class. Every country has its own ruling class, and we have to, in order for us to thrive, will come at their expense.
And what about a Chinese ruling class? Is this, in your opinion, a socialist state or a capitalist state?
I think that is a question that all leftists around the world are asking. Is China communist? I don't know. I've heard both sides. I think we might have to wait to understand the real answer, because there is a central party that controls the country, and they are investing around the world, but they are doing it differently than the Soviet Union did, and they are developing more imperialist ambitions overseas. And of course, we all know they have, at least some or a lot of capitalism within their own country, right? So they have billionaires, billionaires that have become rich from capitalism in the Central Party, in the Communist Party of China. So it's not sure yet, but I think most people would say that it's not a socialist country, but maybe has socialist tendencies. So we don't have a clear answer yet. I think it's too early to tell.
Understand. And I've seen that you started a project about, like a podcast about the revolutionary theory and practice. Can you tell a little more about it?
Yeah, so in America, where I live, I know most people are very ignorant and have no idea about revolutionary theory, whether it's Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, Juche, I don't want to say, but Trotskyism, or even anarchism. There's different types of anarchism, anarcho-syndicalism, anarcho-communism. But people have no idea what to study, so I wanted to create a podcast to talk about the theory, but also talk about the revolutionary history of not only the U.S. but in the world. Of course, the birth of socialism here in Russia, in the Soviet Union, and other countries around the world, but also in America. There has been many anarchists and communists and socialists that have organized the most powerful movements in my country. And I want Americans to learn that part of history and say, hey, listen, there is something else besides capitalism. And many people have fought and died to make the world a better place. And a lot of young people like podcasts now.
That's impressive. And how do you see possible to spread left ideas in the United States, where there are so many myths and lies about socialism, about communism, and like average people fear the communism more than Hitler?
So in America, things are really bad right now. We have the highest inequalities that our country has ever seen. There are many, many poor people that are struggling, that don't have health care, that don't have jobs, that don't have education. Black people are being shot by the police every single day. We have, Mexicans and other Latin Americans coming into the country that are suffering under dire conditions. This is the richest country in the world. And we have places in America where they either don't have access to running water or that water is poisoned, like in Flint, Michigan, where they are drinking lead contamination through their public water sources. And poor people are joining the military and going to die for the weapons corporations. And they're coming back and they're killing themselves. We have corruption in our government. The corporations control everything. Many people are unhealthy. The list goes on and on and on. And I think it's not as bad as, 1916 in Russia, but I think as things get worse, people will begin to ask questions like, why isn't this working anymore? And that's why we as communists, as organizers, we have to propagate, we have to educate the masses and guide them basically to liberation. And this is a tough task. The difference between, I would say, our generation and the older generation is that our generation, we don't have time. Climate change and nuclear weapons is a real threat for the 21st century. So we're trying to do all of this from scratch, building it a brand new left movement and around the world with a time limit. And that makes it even more difficult. It's dangerous, but there's no other thing I would be rather doing. I want the world to become a better place. And I live with a lot of guilt as a military veteran going to these wars. So I'm pretty sure this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life.
That's a good thing to hear. So you're saying that the life itself pushing masses to the left, and your mission, like as a communist, to enlighten them.
Yes, well, and also I think most Americans are on the left already. They just don't know it. They don't know what the left and right really means. And they believe in a lot of progressive issues. They want the world to become a better place, and they know that corporations are a problem, but we have to take them to the next step. And I think that's what the job of every communist and any type of leftist organizer is. Just one more step, one more step.
And how do you see the future of the left movement of the communists in America and in the rest of the world in like 5 years or something like that?
I hope it's going to be powerful. Right now, I think we all know that the left is struggling in all countries around the world. But I think, okay, so there's a difference. There's the global north and the global south. Do you know these terms?
Yes.
Okay, so in the centers of capitalism in the global north, and then there's the peripheries of capitalism in the global south. Now, I think right now, the most revolutionary and most advanced communist organizations and people's wars being fought right now are in the peripheries of capitalism. Because like I said earlier, the Soviet Union collapsed, and in the centers of capitalism, leftist thought kind of just disappeared. But leftist thought in the global south kept going. So we have revolutionary wars in the Philippines that controls 1/3 of the country. We have millions and millions of people organizing in India. And we have, also things like the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela that's inspiring the rest of Latin America. And we have a lot of Pan-Africans all around the world that are trying to build a stronger Africa. And these are ways to fight the centers of capitalism. But we need to connect both of these sides of the world, where people living in the centers and the peripheries of capitalism, and build a strong solidarity between them. Not just America and Europe, not just America and Russia, but we need to go to Africa, we need to go to Venezuela, we need to go to anywhere in South Asia and build this strong left movement that is working together and understanding what we need to do and how we need to do it.
So we move to kind of next question. So all lefts, all communists from all different countries have to unite and to fight this system together. And communists from the north and communists from the global south have to unite and combine their forces to reach there.
Well, we have to connect with each other. We can fight our own revolutions in our own country. I live in the belly of the beast, the most powerful country in the world, the imperialist power of the world, right? I'm not going to go to the Philippines and start fighting a war there, right? Because I have an obligation in the belly of the beast to fight U.S. imperialism from where I live. But I can do it in solidarity with people in the Philippines or other people around the world. But it's just about organizing together where we can work on what and decide and make an analysis of current situations so we can push the ruling class and actually become a threat to them so they can become scared of us, and then we can eventually take power. But this is very complex, and we're going to have to experiment and create new things, I believe.
That's inspiring to hear. And the next question is, are there in America groups of young people who are interested in learning about Marxism, and do they unite and cooperate?
The left movement in the U.S. is very divided. Of course, we have one Maoist organization, the Revolutionary Communist Party of the U.S., and they are a little weird. Some people call them a cult around their leader named Bob Avakian. There may be problems in that organization, but that's the only Maoist organization. Then you have many, many Marxist-Leninist organizations. You have the Party for Socialism and Liberation. You have the Workers' World Party. You have two Freedom Socialist Road organizations, and you have the Communist Party of the USA, and a few others. But they are all split, and they all have a different way of organizing. And some of the old communists in the organizations, they got into a fight a long time ago, 10, 20, 30 years ago, so they don't want to organize with each other today. But that is the wrong path to follow. That's why I think this new younger generation who is not joining these organizations, they're really coming together in ways of learning theory, trying to create a better analysis of their situation today in the 21st century, and to learn new ways of how to fight the ruling class in the U.S. Because if we ever have socialism in the U.S., it's going to be socialism with an American characteristics, right? Just like China created socialism with Chinese characteristics, because we have a separate history just like every other country. I think we need to all keep that in mind when we organize with each other. But the U.S. right now is very divided. So I don't know where that is going. I just want to, going back, America is a dying empire, so it's very difficult to organize because people are just, very uneducated. So I don't know where the direction is going with the U.S., but there are people that are not in these organizations that are trying to pull other people together. And hopefully in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, there will be a new organization. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but I feel like that is a better chance in the future than trying to change these old organizations.
So the whole situation is very similar to the Russian situation, when we have different old communist organizations which are built on separation, where is the central organization and the minor organizations, and there are no real freedom in it. And the most perspective looking are the young organizations which are made from young people without any hierarchy and built on democracy principles. Mm-hmm. Like every part of this community is equal.
Yeah. So you're asking me, are they like that in the U.S.?
Yes.
From what I understand, they are. It's the very same thing. And yeah, so many young people join and they learn this organization and then they leave, which is a problem with all organizations, whether it's peace or communist organization, because they have this structure that you're saying, this hierarchical structure, and people aren't, there's new people coming in with new ideas, but then the old people, they don't want to hear the new ideas, right? But it's just, in general, it's hard to organize and get people to even think about communist theory, let alone join a communist organization. But then there's also problems with the current communist organizations, who some people call them revisionists, because all they want to do is go out and hold signs and do public speeches and not build real power through and from the masses. And these are debates that a lot of people on the left are having today in the U.S.
Okay, and moving to the next, can you tell us about your plans of your anti-military activity and communist activity?
So the anti-war and peace community is different from the communist community. Now there are some communists in the anti-war and peace community, but many of the anti-war and peace people many of them are liberals. You know, many of them still believe that there can be peace in capitalism. And that's a huge problem. And that's why I wanted to learn and organize more with communists, because it's making the connection of the economy to the political system, to the military system overseas, and imperialism overall. So I am trying to slowly educate people in the peace movement to become more left, to throw little ideas of communist history and theory and why it's important. But I think there's two steps. One is to realize that capitalism is the problem. And the next step is, what do you do about it? And those are two very large steps for people to make, especially in America, and especially if you're a liberal in the peace movement. So there are many of us that are trying, the younger people in the peace movement, that are trying to get the older liberal folks in the peace movement to understand that there are these contradictions in capitalism, and that we need to understand that we're trying to get them to have a class analysis, because in America we don't learn anything about class. It's if anything, we just learn about income class, you know, lower class, middle class, upper class, and that's it. But not the ruling class, not the working class, or any other type of class, or the layers within different classes. So we're trying to get them to understand and learn about this and become interested in it. But it's very difficult, because much of the peace movement are what I would call the petty bourgeoisie. They come from a petty bourgeois background where they have big homes, they own land, they had a good job, they are retired. So they don't want a revolution. They don't want to overthrow the system, because they are comfortable. They can go home and they have electricity and they have big homes and families, and they don't want to threaten that stuff. But then there's also younger people who are like, listen, I'm poor. There's no opportunity here. So we understand that capitalism is a problem, and it is connected to the wars overseas. But the idea is to try to get the anti-war movement to become more left.
So that's the right politic to do, to infiltrate the communist idea in non-communist community. To spread it would be kind of effective. And I think we are moving to the end. So it was nice to have you here, and I think we all want to wish luck in your struggle against the war hawks and the struggle against the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, of course, the solidarity with you. I really appreciate everything. Thanks for coming down here. It's great to meet you. And yeah, I hope we have solidarity in the future and change the world for a better place.
And at the end of the conversation, do you have something to say to our subscribers?
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed the video. I am excited for a successful future for both of us. And I'd like to wish you solidarity, and thank you for watching Station Marx.